Hello, I'm superphiz. Today is January 29th, 2024. I'm here with Jim McDonald and Robert Olsen from Attestant. How are you guys?
Very good, thank you.
I think Robert
Very good, thanks.
Oh, great. Good. It's wild to me that we haven't done this before. I know that Vouch is a very powerful product. It is kind of the thing that I talk about every day on Twitter. I guess maybe Robert said it, like, I don't identify Vouch enough, and it's because I'm not, I haven't used it.
No, just for the record, it's not you don't understand it enough. You literally never give us any amplification. Zero, nada, null, zilch.
That's not intentional, and it's not a snub. I picked it up twice. I didn't get it going, and I was like, I talk about the things that are most on my mind. If I have a validator running Vouch, I will talk about it because it will be the thing on my mind.
Let's give Jim some colors. Basically, Jim, last week, is it Jack?
Fizz is what I go by.
Fizz was like, I can't believe this is so bad. I can't believe there's no solution. I'm like, wait a minute. Vouch goes, oh yeah, I can't believe no one talks about it. You're the mouthpiece, and you don't talk about it. So what do you expect anyone else to? Anyway, that's a demo. Here we are.
I've spoken with Jim in the past. The ETH tool. I absolutely support the work. But as I said, I talk about the things that are on my mind. It was never intended as a snub, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it, feeling comfortable with it, and sharing it more frequently. Let's see, where do we start? We know solo home staking is a big deal. We know that uptime is a big deal. We know that security is a big deal. Do you want to begin with Attestant and then zoom into what Vouch and Dirk are?
Sure, yeah, we can do that. Attestant is an institutional staking provider. We've been around since before Genesis for Ethereum and heavily focus on safety and security. The short version is that we sat down and said to ourselves, if we were staking our Ether, what would we need? What kind of safety features would we need? And we really spent a fair bit of time digging into that and trying to understand all of the holes that exist when you're staking. That's not just as a service, as Attestant does, but also if you are staking at home, if you're running this thing as a service for your friends, regardless of what it is. There's a whole bunch of things where you want to be very careful. The big bugbear has always been slashing risk. It's something we spend a lot of time protecting against. We can talk about that. That's basically what Dirk does. So Dirk is a key manager. It looks after keys. It can distribute them into shards. It can have all sorts of permission systems around it. But fundamentally, that's a bit that stops the slashing. On the other hand, as you mentioned, it's uptime. It's not attesting to the wrong chain. So when we look at the supermajority issues and similar and all that kind of thing flying around at the moment, there's a whole bunch of things in and around that. And that is where Vouch steps in. The idea of Vouch is very much to work with multiple beacon nodes, multiple execution clients as a result, and actually work with them to understand the best thing for the chain at any one point in time. Now that gives us additional security for our funds. It gives us better performance as it happens. It allows us to create different configurations. A traditional home staker, very easy configuration. I have an execution client, a consensus client. I have a validator client. They talk to each other and I validate. That's fine, but as we're hearing, there's been a lot of struggle in and around that area when suddenly you realize that, hey, perhaps my system's not as good as I thought it was. If you're on Geth, you're worried about supermajority issue. If you're on Nethermind, you might be going, I was down for a few hours last week. So there's different reasons why you want multiple clients in an environment. And that's what Vouch gives you. Today, we're focusing more on Vouch, which is the ability to talk to multiple beacon nodes, make good choices about what blocks we're proposing, what blocks we are attesting to, and making sure really that that's as stable as we can get it.
Great. I did set up a virtual machine that has access to 2 Haleski client pairs, and I'm hoping we can do a quick demo. For me, interacting with it is as valuable as understanding how it works. I think that it's important for people to understand we have fallback. Like, I have plenty of fallback clients at my house. If Nethermind goes down, I fail over to Lighthouse. If Lighthouse goes down, I guess I'm failing over to Lodestar right now. But I have lots of failover. And Vouch is kind of like, it's not failover. It is consistently pulling each client to determine the best information to submit.
Absolutely correct. Yes. Although again, that's one of the configurations. Another example might be, let's say you're running a home system, but you want a backup system. Maybe you got one sitting in the cloud. Then you can run primarily with your local system and fail over to the one further away, which might give you worse attestation performance, might not be as performant or whatever else, but is available if necessary. That ability to keep running even if your local client goes wrong for some reason. Yes, there are bugs out there, but the best examples are the operational issues. Your disk is full up. Your ISP has cut your internet because you've been burning through it. Someone pulled the power switch on your PC. These are all the things that are far more likely to happen than the great big headline-grabbing client bugs. But again, that's the kind of thing you want day to day. It's day 3 and back at home, my validator's not working. So being able to increase that reliability, being able to increase the surety of how these things work, I think is important. It's not just the wild, crazy 1 in a million chances that are out there. It's making your day-to-day validating experience better.
Great. Yeah. I know that Vouch works well with consensus layer clients. Does it extend to execution clients, or is that kind of consumed within the consensus layer data that we're broadcasting?
Yeah, it's kind of the latter, right? Every consensus node has an execution node behind it. If you're talking to one consensus node, you're talking to the single execution client behind it. If you're talking to 2 consensus clients, then obviously there's 2 execution clients behind them. We tend to think of the consensus and execution clients as a tight pairing. Now, there are some systems out there that allow you to do slightly different things with it. But normally speaking, again, for safety and security, you really want to take a consensus client, an execution client, pair them together and mentally think of them as a single Ethereum node instance.
What I wanted to focus on today is uptime. I'm not obsessed with uptime. I want people to feel comfortable if they're on vacation for a week. I want people to feel comfortable with their node going down. It's not the end of the world.
No.
You're not going to get slashed. You're going to lose a few dollars and it's going to come right back. What I do want people to be aware of is this super majority client risk. It is a black swan. It is not a terribly likely event, but the potential is real. Like, we're foolish to ignore that potential. You can run multiple client pairs and Vouch will protect you from this black swan event. Let's say that my client pairs are Lighthouse and Geth and Lodestar and Nethermind. Will Vouch protect me in that case? Do I need 3 so that 2 are accurate and 1 is the outlier?
We can protect you. The best thing to do, I think, is to walk through setting up Vouch. So the first time round, we'll create a wallet, put a validator in there. We'll set up Vouch to talk to a single beacon node. And then step 2 is what we'll do is we'll then talk to 2 separate beacon nodes. One of them, as you mentioned, Lighthouse with Geth behind it, and show then how we can not use Geth in the critical piece, which is creating the attestation data.
And I have a key that's waiting to be run. Do you have a demo ready, or will we use my demo?
Let's use yours. Is that key an active validator?
It went active yesterday, so it is offline. I'm always happy to confess I am not a technical expert. I am very interested in the space, but I get a little nervous on stage because I do not know everything.
I'm happy to walk you through it. Let's give it a go. If you're starting with a key, then you basically have 3 steps. The first one is to import it into a format that Vouch understands. It's very similar to the key store, just slightly different. Again, a lot of the design behind it was to try to make sure that we could create an environment where you could run 1 key, 1,000 keys, 10,000 keys, whatever you need with a similar amount of effort. For anyone who runs a larger environment, your startup time can be quite high because you're sitting there churning through each key one at a time as it loads. So it's fine if you've got 1 key or 5 keys. If you get to like 50 or 100, it becomes painful. If you're running 1,000, it's really quite bad. With our system, it's only a short step away from the key stores, but it gives us, like we said, a couple of advantages. Once those keys are imported, it's a case of obtaining Vouch, configuring Vouch to point to the relevant beacon nodes, and off we go.
I feel like we're going to be able to do this. No, I should never assume that a demo is going to go quickly, and it's never going to work, but I'm still excited.
That's the attitude.
Let's add the virtual machine. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Great. This is my key that's not running. It is Haleski. What is that? 1566037. And I set these nodes up with Rocket Pool because I can do it in 5 minutes.
Reading your Twitter feed, you are not. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's a good product. I love it. I have Nethermind, ChainSafe. Let's see what we have here. I have Besu and Nimbus. And here I have the key store. And I also have the Attestant or the Vouch repository.
Right. So if we start with the Vouch repository, the first thing we need to do is download the binary. So let's get that out of the way.
There's Vouch.
If we go to releases, just down to the right, that's it. These are the latest betas. If we scroll down a bit, 176, there we go. We can grab that. Assumedly, that's a Linux AMD 64.
It's like you're controlling a screen, Jim.
And now what we need to do is just Tarex the effort. We've got a copy of Vouch on there. The other thing we will need, if you don't have it, will be eth_do. eth_do is under the WhieldTech repository, so it's github.com/WhieldTech/eth_do. Again, go to releases, pull down the latest release.
I have a new keyboard. Not happy with it.
It's amazing how long it takes to get used to them, right? I have several computers in different places, so whenever I get a new keyboard, I have to buy like 4 of them. Otherwise, it's a nightmare. My wife hates me when I keep changing them.
I have 4 different workstations. 3 of them have the same keyboard, but one of them is just this desktop situation where I use a different keyboard. And when I decide to change, I buy like 5 until I get one that I'm happy with. Sorry, off topic. Let's go.
What's your recommendation at the moment?
I like the Cherry MX Silent Red. Red Silent is what. This is a cherry brown, and it makes the loudest clicking that's driving me crazy.
I love them. I've got a DAS keyboard, and it's similar type of thing with a noise. But ultimately, I'm typing far more when I'm not on video. I'm going to stick with the one that makes clicky noises that I'm happy with.
I like a little bit. I don't like to wake the house up.
Yeah, there is that.
All of my typing is angry.
Yeah.
All right, so I have eth_do and Vouch.
So the first thing we're going to do is create a wallet. A wallet is something that can store any number of keys. For eth_do, we just do eth_do wallet.
I want to make sure everyone can see this like I'd like them to.
No problems.
I want this to be half screen so it's near the center.
If you drag it to the left, it should do that. Oh,
I thought so, but they have different sticky properties.
I know, right, yeah.
eth_do.
So wallet create. Then we have to give the wallet name. So -- wallet equals, call it validators. So if you hit enter on that one, that's now created a wallet. Now, because you have a key store, we need to import that key store. So if you do eth_do account import, we're going to basically bring that key store in. So if we do -- key store equals, and then that name, key store -m-128381, etc. So that will bring the key store in. But we need to provide a passphrase to decode the key store. So -- key store -passphrase, not equals whatever your passphrase for that key store is. So that will be our decryption passphrase. However, we also want a separate passphrase to encrypt it back into the system that eth_do uses. We want -- passphrase equals, and then it can be whatever you like. If you want to use your secure passphrase, feel free. If you just hit return now.
Message.
What did it say?
Failed to obtain input. Account is required.
Oh, it didn't. Okay, we need to tell it where we're importing it to. So -- account equals, and our wallet was called validator, so it will be validators / and then whatever we want to call the key store. So we can call it 1, for example.
Do we call it validator or validators?
Validators, I'm pretty sure it was.
Okay.
You've met this one before.
Yeah.
We do put passphrase requirements in there, but allow people to skip it for demo purposes as well as other reasons. So if we can confirm that's there, we can do eth_do account info - account equals validator /1. So it's up and running. Next step, we need to create a Vouch configuration file. For that, if we go back to web pages and we go back to the Vouch, just hit, up to, go to the top. hit Vouch there to the top left. Under the docs directory, there's a note called Getting Started. Click on that and then Getting Started. So here's an example of a Vouch configuration file. So if you want, you can grab that, copy that. We need to create a file called .vouch.
I think I'm going to do this in gedit so it's more visible.
No problems. There are a few little changes we're going to need to make in this, but that's okay. What we have here is a very basic Vouch configuration file. The top line says, this is where I'm talking to my beacon node. It's set to run on a local host on port 5052. I assume, given your containerization, we'll need to change that to be something else. Containers are talking to each other.
They're not, so they're on my LAN. They're not actually.
They're all bridged. That's easy.
Let's see.
So the other question is, are you running Lighthouse there?
I think it's standardized.
5052,
yes.
There we go. Back to our configuration. Our accounts was validated with a lowercase v. So that basically defines accounts. Again, you can run multiple Vouch instances if you want, or you can have one Vouch instance to talk to multiple different wallets and accounts and subsets of accounts. That basically says anything that's in validators will try and use as a key. Passphrase, you're going to have to change to your magically secret value. And that's basically it. Now, in the real world, there'll be a few other changes. For example, there's a fallback fee recipient address in here. That might be fee recipient, not recipient. Let me look.
Do you remember where that was? What stage you got to?
I don't recall.
Yeah.
You hadn't built it for yourself, so you didn't have a chance to follow it, right?
I didn't have a reference. So
we can fix that now. Where it says fallback recipient address, it's slightly different. I think it's now fallback-fee-recipient. We can get rid of the address at the end and the dash.
Just the text. Yeah.
That's it.
But other people might have got to the same roadblock you got to, and that would be helpful for us.
Yeah, just hit a doc issue, which I'll be fixing as soon as we come off this call. This literally says, here's the beacon node. This is what I'm going to talk to. These are my validators. I've got a fallback fee recipient if I need it. We're not too worried about proposing blocks at the moment. And that's basically it. In an absolutely simplistic world, this is all that's needed. The last thing on this list is the metrics information. A lot of code bases spend a lot of time talking through logs, which is great again, but not so good if you've got multiple instances or poor internet connection. Vouch and the other products talk via metrics. When they do things, they log it in the metrics. When something fails, it logs in the metrics. It generally makes it a lot easier to carry out large-scale monitoring and management of the systems. So we always fall back to that. If we save that. So if we just try running vouch./vouch. The key message there is the bottom line, second last line there, where it says old validator 0, new validators 1, which means it's found the new validator, checked it on chain to make sure it's there, that it's running, that it's behaving, and we are up and running.
My message of the day is that Vouch is easy. It seems complex when you're creating a Hydra. I so wish that I had done this 2 years ago even.
I so wish you had reached out and said it wasn't working for you. You hit a roadblock.
It's like everything. You try it for 5 minutes and you're like, that is what it is, and then you move on.
Second best time to try anything, right?
Is now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's see if we can get one attestant here and then add the second client, which should be pretty simple.
Yep, it'll take anywhere up to 12 minutes or so to run. If you can bring up a second window on that machine. So have you got curl on there? I assume you've got curl.
It has now.
So if you do curl access http://localhost:12345/ metrics scroll past. We hold a huge amount, but there's some that are quite interesting. Tweak that and pipe that to egrep. Single quote, caret, little hat, vouch, underbar, dot stuff, and then you want another underbar, process, underbar, requests, underbar, total. Normally we'll be doing this in Prometheus, which would be easier, but if you run that, what we're seeing here are the actions that Vouch is taking. No attestation yet.
It is excited.
So we've done a couple of things here. We use this to monitor and see what's going on. We can see there's a beacon committee subscription. One of the things that Any validator client has to do is say, I've got these validators and you need to subscribe to certain subnets internally. It's an internal thing, but we've talked to the beacon node. We've prepared for any proposals. Chances are you don't have a proposal this epoch, but the preparation is to make sure that if there is something coming, your beacon nodes are aware they can start building blocks. They inform the execution client. So you can sort of page up and run that again and see what exciting things have changed. So we're a while yet. So you got one validator, right? Sometime over the next 6 minutes, we will expect to see an attestation come in there. We'll see some other bits and pieces kick in if you're having sync committees or similar. Given we need to swap screens, I think this is a perfect time.
Is there a Grafana dashboard for this already, or do you mostly grep curl?
Disappointingly not. We have some, but they're internal. We haven't managed to have the time to get them tidied up and sort of got to the stage where they can be used that easily. It is one of the things on our list that we would love to do, and it's just finding a little bit of time.
Yeah, I'll see you guys in 5 minutes.
Excellent.
Love it. So,
Recording in progress.
we're back.
Hey guys, I didn't realize it would be so simple. We all have some level of imposter syndrome, and I'm not technical. My training is in psychology, and this is my side hobby. When I see something that's initially like, oh, I don't get it, I always assume that's out of my reach rather than I just didn't connect immediately with it. What do you mean?
You type super fast.
Oh, yeah. That's just my clacky keyboard. It's the illusion of speed.
Absolutely. They're great for it though, right? Yeah, no, I mean, there are a whole bunch of concepts behind it. A lot of people say, hey, it's just the enterprise. You couldn't use it for individual staking or home staking or similar. We tried to build this was to allow anyone to use it. And honestly, what we've had has been some great feedback from people all the way down the line saying this is complex or that's confusing. There's a whole docs directory that didn't used to exist around how to configure things, how to get stuff up and running, purely because we want to make sure that it's as easy as possible. It's a simple task, right? And when we look at what we've done so far, Vouch is running as a validator client, but we don't have that key protection that we would have with other systems because that's on the back end. Now, happy to go through this with another session to say, let's do exactly the same thing, but let's use Dirk on a different box and actually have all that running. Now, that would be, again, another good thing to do. But there's always going to be little tweaks. But why don't we see what our validator has been doing in the last few minutes?
We have an attestation, which is good.
You jumped ahead of it.
No, I waited as long as I could. Would you like to look at the Prometheus metrics, or?
Yeah, just obviously you won't see anything in logs. We have a very specific way of setting stuff up in logs. We make warnings only for warnings, info only for actual information as necessary. We don't want logs to get flooded and again fill up people's disks because it's still a very common problem for everyone out there. And B, we don't want to have to look at logs. Logs often are pruned, they're rotated, they move around. You really don't want to have to dig through multiple files and all the rest of it to see what's going on.
That's what Beacon Chain is for, right?
Absolutely. So ultimately, we just want everything to be fed through attestation or through metrics. We're not seeing your screen. It'd be great if you could share it again.
That was the fun part. That was the big reveal. 0 inclusion distance. It's a good one.
So if we go back to the CLI again, you can fire up those metrics, have another look here. Well, we can see here, right? So every time an epoch passes, roughly, we'll get another Beacon Committee subscription because they move. Every epoch, the subscriptions move. The proposal preparation runs on. So what we're seeing here is there's been an attestation process. It has run. It has succeeded. So we create an attestation. You will get similar metrics every time you propose a block, every time you're in a sync committee. So all of the, and there's a few others as well, but they're the kind of ones that show up there. Now, behind the scenes, there's ludicrous amounts of data. If you look at the number of metrics, it's well in the hundreds. There's a lot of timing information for each system. There's information downstream about how well the clients we're talking to are doing, and that can feed back into some of the discussion we're having about picking the right client and similar. But that's basically how we're now up and running.
Let's add another client.
So if we go back to our vouch.yaml file, we can leave him running. Oh, you killed it. Just rerun Vouch, it's fine.
Okay.
It'll sit there and tick along in the background. We'll change the configuration file on the other screen, and then we'll restart Vouch. Now, Vouch is designed to be what we call stateless. It should be able to start up and shut down very quickly, virtually regardless of the number of validators that are running on it. If you try shutting it down, one of the things it will do is check to see if it's got any more attestations to do. In this particular slot, If it does, it'll actually just wait until it's done and then it'll shut down. It's designed to try and make things a little bit friendlier. Simply restart it and it will have updates if you put a new version in, if you change your configuration, whatever that might be.
That is a genius feature for all of the clients. I don't know why that's not, why that isn't more popular. Like, at least it should be a runtime switch. Like, well, wait.
I mean, there are lots of arguments back and forth, right? I mean, again, though, a lot of validator clients have key management and slashing protection built into the validator client. They're a lot more complex in terms of the things they're doing, the possible path through it. By separating those two things out, it allows us to do some clever stuff. When we don't decrypt anything, it's all in Dirk. Things like that allow us to be much more flexible with coming up and down quickly. So yeah, it's a slightly different way of doing things. Yeah. So let's get our second node in there. If we change where it says beacon node address, if we change it to beacon node addresses, and then if we put that first one in square brackets, we're going to change from having a single beacon node to a list. Yeah. So if we go back inside the square brackets and then comma and then paste your IP address.
Let's check that just to make sure that we don't get surprised. Yes.
Vouch is very much designed to allow people to choose kind of what they want to do with it. You might be in a situation where your two beacon nodes are right next to each other. One might be in the US and one might be in Asia. It might be on flaky hardware, for example. So for all of these different reasons, we define the beacon node addresses that are out there. But then after that, we can start to pick and choose as to which ones we want. So if we go all the way to the bottom of the screen, we can start adding in what we call strategies. So strategies are individual items for each type of information we may need. If you hit return, indent one, and type attestation data, all one word, all of this is in the documentation. We will hit return, indent again, and we want style : best. Now, as it stands, what this means is when we fetch attestation data, we will get the best attestation data we can from the beacon nodes that are listed above. However, sometimes best isn't necessarily what we want. For example, there's another style that could be first. So if you have a primary and a secondary, your primary is nice and close, your secondary is a long way away, you might change this to first. There's different ways of doing it. But what we're going to do, can you grab the top line and just copy it? So grab the whole thing, yeah. We can copy it and paste it down at the bottom now. Indented under style, yeah. Same level as style. If we left this like this explicitly says we want to use both of those beacon nodes. However, the first one is the one that already has geth on. So we can delete that one from the list. With this stage, we're using a strategy and saying we want the best one, just because it's easier now when we add a third one. Although we're saying we're getting the best, we're only getting it from this. It's Lodestar and
Nimbus, I think.
Lodestar and Nimbus? No, hang on. What have you got on here?
That's at one point.
Besu Nimbus.
So we're getting it from Besu. The execution payload has to have been validated by Besu. This comes back to the whole problem of the majority client and supermajority client. And Fizz, you were there when we did this for Prism, right? And now we're just doing the same thing for Geth. The reality is it's not the proposal that kills you, right? We can allow invalid blocks to be proposed, be they on the consensus side or the execution side. The short version is we can't really stop invalid blocks from being proposed because whoever has the microphone at the time, whoever's the proposer, can create a block. What we can do is two things. One is we can reject it before we get to vote on it. And two is we can reject it at the attestation data phase. In this example, let's say we've hit the black swan. A geth node somewhere has created an invalid payload. When that block arrives at your two beacon nodes, Nimbus will pass it to Besu. Besu will turn around and go, nope, that's not valid, and throw it out. Lighthouse will pass it to Geth. Geth will say, yeah, looks fine. Now, if we assume this was block 7, Lighthouse thinks that block 7 is the latest block. Nimbus thinks block 6 is the latest block because it saw a block 7, but it was invalid. because we've said for attestation, we're only going to go to BSU via Nimbus. We will get, when we test, we will be told that the latest block is still block 6. We will not attest to the invalid block created by Geth, even though it's in our infrastructure. We will not attest to it. We will never be in a situation where we finalize an invalid chain.
My question here, what is the value of running this other pair if we're never using it for attestation data?
You're using it for everything else. Proposals, for example, when you come to create a proposal, it might be that your Nimbus node is running a bit slow, or the Lighthouse has got a better attestation packing algorithm, or Geth has a better execution payload. It might be that the block proposed by one consensus execution pair is better than another.
You have an entire blog article about this that's very in-depth about the value of different packing.
Absolutely. Beacon nodes operate totally differently in the situation where the last block was created and made and everyone's happy with it, or the last block was skipped entirely, or the last block was orphaned. In those situations, you end up with differences in algorithms, differences in performance, differences in capabilities, and it's always a trade-off. You can build blocks with certain conditions, but the time you spend packing attestations isn't the time you can spend looking back to see if that last block you're building on was valid. There's always trade-offs going on. Ultimately, the best you can do is you can have multiple beacon nodes. Ideally, you'd run 3-4 different pairs in a large-scale environment. I'll give you an example. Teku, when I've been running that, every now and again, it's off to do some garbage collection and is out to lunch when we ask it for data. It'll take a second or two to come back, and what will normally take a couple of milliseconds because it's busy doing something else. Again, by having multiple systems, you smooth out the bumps. Beacon nodes are complex beasts. Execution clients are complex beasts. The reality is it's never going to be absolutely plain sailing and smooth, regardless of which pair you choose. By picking multiple pairs, you're making your life as safe as possible.
I'd like to share a fantasy scenario and have you tell me how possible or realistic it is. So right now we're running 2 clients and there's no way to tell which one is most valid because they each have an equal view. If I had 3 clients, is there a way that it could use all 3 clients but exclude, let's say Geth does have this fault that, or it's not Geth, let's say it is whatever Nimbus has this fault and the other 2 clients have data they agree on and it submits the consensus rather than the outlier?
Yeah, so this matters for attestation data far more than anything else. So there is a style coming in, the next version of Vouch, which will be released as soon as the DNNEB specs are finalized, so hopefully in the next few days. And that is an attestation style called majority. You could have 3 nodes, and what you could do is you could say, I'm going to set a threshold of 2. Which means that as soon as 2 of the 3 nodes agree on what to use for attestation data, then we're good and off we go, and we'll use that. It protects against certain things. However, if one of your nodes is running a little slow or there's general network instability, sometimes you'll be in a situation where you just won't get 2 nodes, any 2 of the 3 nodes agreeing on what the attestation data may be. In that situation, Vouch will, because of the configuration saying I must have at least 2 that agree, if you get 3 different answers, Vouch will throw its hands up and go, well, look, I'm not meeting what you've asked me to do, so I will not attest. That will show up on our...
That's good.
If that's what you want, then that's absolutely fine.
I view the network differently than people who expect perfect effectiveness. I would rather miss an attestation than not be sure that it's exactly what I want to submit. I'm more comfortable with that. And I think a lot of home operators, they're unrealistically worried about the potential of slashing. But from our perspective, it's better to remain silent and lose 4 cents than to submit something that's inaccurate and, yeah.
Potentially harm the network as a result. With Vouch, a lot of what we have built is to try and get the best for the network. Now, A lot of the time, what is best for the network is best for the staker in terms of the rewards are relatively speaking aligned. In other places, but that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide the best service we can to the network as a whole. So absolutely, that's critical. Yeah.
I'm constantly finding my intentions for the network are not, they don't represent everyone. I'm here for the 100 years of Ethereum. I'm not here for max profit today. That difference with people. But we can still act in the same way because there's an overlap that benefits both of us every day.
And the overlap's pretty big. But again, it is complex. When we're talking about like the strategies, there are other ones that we got first, best, majority, and they're different ones for different people. To configure something like Vouch, what you have to do is start with the question of what you want to do in these situations. Once you know that, there's a strategy, we can use this strategy, that strategy, but most people turn up and just go, I just wanted to do it. I don't care. And they're like, well, you do care. You're just not quite sure what you care about yet. There are all these different configurations, different ways of doing things. But like we said, if we look at this configuration now on the screen in front of us, you've built something that protects you against finalizing a bad block created or accepted by Geth.
Yeah.
You can save this. Let's save this and see if we just kick the thing off.
I want to point out to people who are listening, and even in 10 years, it may not have the same context. We're fans of Geth. Geth is a very solid product. The reason we're excluding Geth here is because at the moment, Geth runs about 80% of execution clients, and there is a risk that Geth could cause a chain fork. We want to mitigate that risk. And so in 3 years, it will be a different client and the same situation, maybe.
It's a really important point, actually, there, Fizz, because one of the things that we're seeing an awful lot of people say is, I'm committing to leaving Geth and going to Nethermind. But we're seeing a lot of people saying exactly the same thing. And the danger is we end up with Nethermind just flipping with Geth, right? We don't need 60% of the network to move from Geth to Nethermind because we're being in the same situation just with a different client. It's great you've got Bisu up on here. We're seeing products like Reth starting to come through as well. Having a large number of different execution clients and having people use different execution clients is critical. And it's absolutely not a Geth thing. Internally, we use Geth. We love it. It's a high quality product. It has a lot of features that we love. It's important to recognize that diversity is not anti anything. It's just making sure there is a good spread.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know that you have been careful careful with your disclosure of Attestant operations, but I'm curious to know, do you disclose how many clients or different client pairs you run?
We provide information via Lido. We're one of the Lido node operators, and there's information there. We're using Geth, Nethermind, in production as the execution side. We are running with additional ones in development, and we're continually monitoring them to see if they're suitable for production. We work well with all of the devs on both the consensus and the execution side where we see issues. Only having 2 products that we think are good enough for production isn't good enough for us. We want to have at least 4, right? Because then an even split's 25%. The magic numbers are 1/3 and 2/3, right? And we have to be below 2/3 to make the network fundamentally long-term viable. We need to be below 1/3 to make it as safe as we can. In that situation, in a perfect world, if we could separate all the validators on the planet between 3 nodes, fine. But we're going to need 4 or 5. So there's always going to be a favorite for one reason. There's a flavor of the month for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. We need 4 or 5 out there that allow us to say, well, with a spread with some kind of variance, we're still below that 33% for any one client.
We do stake billions of dollars non-custodially.
I'm aware of the value of your product. You run Geth. You had said that you need more than 2. Were you referring to Nethermind as the second production quality?
That's our second client we run in production today.
And obviously, Teku is a solid product.
On the consensus side, we run Teku, we run Nimbus, we run Lighthouse, we have Present. Bisu? Yeah, don't worry. I know. If they'd only called them, they need to just stick with the name they had originally, and not to have that whole patent
Pegasus.
problem. And, Pegasus. There's a blast from the past. Absolutely, yes. We work with all of them to see what works where and what works best. We have used Vouch in the past. We may be bringing it back again in the future. The metrics that Vouch generates allows us to see things like how long each client takes to do certain operations, how many of them fail for some reason, what performance we're getting in terms of how often does it give us the best block, right? Because if we're finding that there are weaknesses somewhere, if we're running it and never using it, that's not a lot of use. Yeah. We want to make sure that we've always got options out there. We're mixing and matching. Sometimes Nimbus works best with Nethermind. Sometimes it works better with Geth, depending on the situation. So there's a very complex, dynamic situation. It changes every release. Everyone optimizes, tweaks, alters. It's a fluid situation. On dev in our test nets, we run more combinations in production, and then we pick the best ones. But we don't just look at one and go, that doesn't work very well. We'll dig into it. We'll find out why and work with the teams to try to make sure that it's up there. Because again, if we have one or two or even three clear winners, we're not going to get the diversity we need.
I agree. Got to be 4, at least. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for promoting that message. It means a lot coming from you, from someone who really gets not just the like you get the technical side, and I don't think there's enough. I don't know how to say. Technically minded people have been reserved in the messaging that we really have to have those 4 clients out.
And it's been difficult, right? Because normally they are aligned with one or other of either the execution clients or the consensus clients.
Yes. You're in a perfect position to, and even having your background.
Not care for it. Well, you know what? It's best for the network, and that is the be all and the end all of it. If it wasn't best for the network, absolutely we'd have different conversations. But as it stands, it's the one thing that matters. Like I said, my second worry behind Geth being the supermajority is that just Nethermind just replaces it, right?
We've seen a little bit of that with Prism reducing and Lighthouse. It's not a problem yet, but I see the potential for that if we don't continue to balance. But I do have this sense in the long run, as more people understand the value of this diversity, they will maintain a healthy balance.
Mm-hmm. And the nice thing with Vouch here is if tomorrow you look up in your Twitter feed, you've got 60% of the network has moved from Geth to Nethermind, you can go into your Vouch config, change that one line about which nodes the attestation data, restart, and you're good because it's doing the same thing again, but now it's just using Geth for attestation data rather than Nethermind if the roles are reversed. So again, having that flexibility is really, really important.
I'm going to set up 4 pairs and run them for fun, at least on one key.
So before you do that, you should probably restart Vouch and see if the configuration changes worked.
I've lost it.
It's behind that tab. That window, the last window you had has got 2 tabs. I think it was there.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, just
Eagle Eyes Jim.
Oh yeah, ask where the window is.
So we're good. In the bottom middle of your screen, there's a line that says starting best attestation data strategy.
Hey, I wanted to ask you, you said it super quickly a moment ago that you're adding a new strategy. What was the name of the new strategy?
Majority. So there's again, when Vouch 1.8 comes out, there'll be the release notes. And again, we can see there's a whole bunch of other strategies it kind of talks about as we go through. There's in a multi-client environment, you generally want to sit down and say, which of these do I want to use? When I submit data, do I want to send it to a single node? One of the big comments a while back was there was a lot of concern around the fact that if you're generating attestations, generating proposals, someone knows which node you're on and they can, distributed denial of service or whatever it. You can actually send submissions via an entirely different set of nodes if you so desire. You've got submitter strategies. The least used provider on the planet, unfortunately, is the graffiti provider. Some people occasionally put graffiti in, but there's a whole dynamic thing behind that. Beacon blocks and blinded beacon blocks. Again, you can talk to different nodes. If you're doing blinded beacon blocks, you can have different set of parameters and configuration there. If you're using MEV relays, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, but you don't need any more than what you have to avoid the supermajority issue.
Well, I think for anyone testing, like the basic setup, get it running, then we can tweak it. It's so easy to restart, so I can play with it all day long. On one validator, that's really a good flow for me.
The next step would probably be to bring Dirk into the environment. Your issue at the moment is You now have keys sitting on the same box as your validator client by definition because it's using them locally. That's fine, but if this box goes down, you've lost your key, right? Which means you copy your key somewhere, which now means you've got 2 copies of the key. You're immediately in the danger of slashing and all that fun stuff. So Dirk is very much designed to avoid that. So you could set up 3 Dirk instances. Your validator key would be sharded between 3 of them, which means you can lose one of your Dirk instances. The other 2 will carry on happily and can still sign for you. You don't need to copy keys in that environment to provide resiliency. The other thing is Dirk is a very structured, very focused product. It's not something that we pile loads of features into. It's something that is designed purely to keep your key safe. So the footprint's small, the dependencies are small. We try and make sure that it doesn't change very frequently. But when you add that to the system, that again creates a much higher level of resiliency and security than you would get otherwise.
One of the early times that I brought up using Dirk and Vouch in a private channel, the response I got was, has it been audited? My initial thought is, well, Jim McDonald wrote it. That's enough for me.
Dirk and Vouch and ETH2 and a whole bunch of other things are not audited independently up to a point. However, they all use the underlying same libraries. Rather than auditing ETH2 and Dirk and Vouch, what happened was the Ethereum Foundation audited ETH2 and its underlying libraries. The cryptography libraries, the libraries that access wallets, all of that kind of thing has been audited. There's a link on the Will Tech blog where there's information about the results there. If not, you should do. So we've had an audit of the underlying systems and found a few issues, which is great news for us. The specific products, no, but the underlying tech that is 90% of the work that they do, yes.
It's essentially, it doesn't, there's no point in auditing this CLI front end when what really matters is the Legos that it's built with.
Yes.
That makes perfect sense. I'm curious about, I heard you say 3 instances of Dirk with sharded keys, and then we're looking at 4 different client pairs. For me, because I'm running 7 boxes to do that, how do you see the hardware configuration for something like that?
You can run multiple beacon nodes on the same boxes. You can theoretically put maybe a beacon node and an instance of Dirk on each one, for example. Dirk is lightweight. It signs things and it writes stuff to disk. You've got a slashing database, you have a key signing system, and that's it. So you can run that on relatively low-end hardware. The beacon nodes and execution clients are always a thing that takes up the majority of your network bandwidth, VLC. So it comes down to a question of how many of those you want to run and where you want to put them. You could co-locate Vouch with the beacon node as well. I mean, their Vouch is stateless, so it's no more at risk running on a box with a beacon node than a box by itself. We have spoken about this with Attestant architecture. We co-locate Vouch with a number of beacon nodes and execution clients, so we have bigger boxes that run a combination of them. The signers are separate, and in production we'll run 3 or 5, for example, for our signing threshold. So we'll have 5 separate signers out there. When you look at your costs of validating, then if you're running a single validator, at some stage it starts to get silly to spend hundreds of dollars a month on servers. If you're running 5, 10 production validators, then as soon as you get to that stage, it comes down to what you care about. When we look at every instance of slashing that has happened, which we have got some idea of how it worked, the answer was always, I copied my keys in some way, shape, or form. I copied them because I was upgrading. My old box died, so I brought up a new one, and then the old one came back again. I thought I deleted keys off this system, and I hadn't. So one of the critical things with Dirk is that you don't have to copy your keys because you get resiliency through sharding rather than copying keys around, and that is the big difference. Now, that number can be what you like, 2 or 3, 3 or 5, 4 or 7. I mean, pick whatever level of resiliency that you desire. It depends on how many validators you're running and how much you care about it. But of course, the minute your system goes down, you miss a block proposal, right? And you would have been rich. So, that would have been the 1,000 Ether block. Yeah, you know it was the one because you missed it. And this is the trouble, right? You always want to be, depending on your situation and similar. And again, ultimately, as you said before, hey, I looked at it. It's complex because we try and meet everyone's requirements. We can run with home stakers. We can run with the biggest systems out there. So how do we scale to 10,000 validators? We run over 50,000 validators on a single box. Scaling is often trying to build a system that works under the technical constraints. We kind of started without the technical constraints. Again, you can run Dirk with 1 key, 100 key, 1,000 keys. It'll carry on running. And so being able to have that is useful, but it does mean that for every individual that wants to stake, they need to choose where they sit on the scale. Mm-hmm. What does that mean in terms of laying out their hardware? What does it mean in terms of their architecture? But yeah, putting a relatively meaty box with a couple of beacon nodes and a couple of execution clients on it is not going to break the bank. If you're running more than 2, 3, 4 validators on it, it's probably worthwhile. You can potentially add more beacon nodes to it, have a second box with beacon nodes on it. Your signers, cheap boxes.
Yeah, I would like to close with this thought that when Bitcoin launched in 2010, 2010, there were people running CPUs from home, mining worthless coins for the fun of participating in a network with no belief they were ever going to get a financial reward. They did it because the technology was interesting and they wanted to participate in something that could be cool in the future. That is how I see staking now. It's not about today's financial reward. It's not about how much I'm going to make off MEV. It is about believing in the future of the technology, and that by participating, even potentially at a loss, that we're building something that's going to be more valuable in the future for humanity. So that's why I'm excited.
Yeah, and the easier we can make validating, the easier it is for people to have systems they're comfortable with at home, the more likely we are to have validating across a wider population, across a wider set of geographies, outside of the big cloud providers and infrastructure companies, right? We absolutely need to spread it out there. We have different execution clients, different consensus clients, but that gives us strength. Being able to balance what we have in terms of the flexibility, but then making it simpler and simpler for people to use is certainly a challenge the community is aware of. And let's hope they get their teeth into that one once they've finished working on the majority issue.
I really appreciate you taking the time. I wish that we had done this a few years ago, but we're here now, and that's great. I'd like to maybe play with this for a few weeks and then get back and do Dirk. It'll probably take a week for my video guy to put together. I'm so appreciative of your time. And my favorite takeaway from this is going to be a 1-minute clip that shows setting this up and running it. It's not a day-long process.
Not as scary as we thought, but yeah.
Because anytime, we're always available. We have clients around the world, so time zones don't faze us.
So I just don't sleep.
The jury's still out whether Jim is actually a clone and he's got a bunch in the wardrobe, but that's another.
Yeah, that's half. I don't know, those people who can just work incessantly. Like, I need 8 hours of sleep or I am just a bear. I'm not one of those awesome people. All right, it was great to see you guys.
Yeah, great.
No problems. Take care. Speak soon.
Yeah.